And somebody said, that copper won World War II, boy. You'd be speaking German.
There was a body over in the grass at this overlook, so that we had to delay our interviews for about 45 minutes until the local volunteers got there and took care of it.
All right, just one bad idea after another bad idea after another bad idea. It's like a host of bad ideas.
Fear and hysteria is easier to, I don't know, it catches on easier than common sense and pragmatism.
So we're here live in Duluth, Minnesota at the Outdoor Writers Association meeting there. And we've accumulated a bunch of folks for a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast. This is Hal Herring. I've been hosting these, and I'm with what they calling themselves as the Boys of TU, although which would be Trout Unlimited. I don't know if I'd call them that or not, but
men of TU.
The men of TU. We have the Brett Prettyman, Mark Taylor, and Chris Hunt, and we've all known each other quite a while. So did some big trips with Chris for some Field and Stream stories back in over the years, really quite a few.
Yeah, it's been a
Colorado and Idaho and all over. We've had some adventures, I guess.
Yes, we have.
So I one of them is I would say, what are y'all working on right now? This from Chris.
Well, typically we're busy all over the country with conservation work, but the three of us are all part of TU's growing and sort of we're sort of evolving our communications shop a little bit to where Hal, it used to be I'd give you a shout sometime in March or April, and we'd be in the field sometime in July or
right.
So, whether it was hiking down into the bowels of the Roan Plateau to catch 8-inch cutthroats.
Right, that was a cool trip.
That was a cool trip. Or, we go to Southeast Alaska and look at the Tongass Forest. And I've kind of, for lack of a better term, they're kind of putting me out to pasture a little bit, and I'm spending a lot more time behind the computer actually creating content for anglers and for angler conservationists around the country, while Brett and Mark are doing regional communications work, traditional stuff, trying to reach out to the media and get attention. But they're also doing creating content of their own for our website, which is hopefully going to change here in the next few months.
This is a crowd of everybody's a true writer on this group. I mean, it's a you got your book is on Idaho.
I got a couple of books out, but the last one I did is on fly fishing in Idaho.
Right. Yeah. So it's you got a brain trust anyway, and everybody's doing trips. I mean, last time when I talked to you were going down there to the Okefenokee to do, and we were talking about the shoal. Was it shoal bass in that?
There were some interesting critters in that. It was funny. I called. We'd connected, and I was parked at a bank parking lot or something in Kingsland, Georgia.
Yeah.
And I told you where I was, and of course, immediately your accent got even thicker.
Yeah.
And you were like, I know exactly what it's like.
I know where you got to go.
And, you were telling me about those blackwater swamps, and this has absolutely nothing to do with trout, but it has everything to do with fishing. And if you like to fly fish especially, I mean, I'm kind of I like to catch the weird stuff, the stuff that nobody else really bothers to go after. And I was fishing the Okefenokee swamp, which there's certainly more alligators than people in there. And I was catching this fish called a bowfin. The locals call it a mudfish because they can't figure out how to make it edible.
Right.
So one guy said, hey, just tell them you're catching cypress trout. I said, cypress trout.
There you go.
Brilliant. And they were a lot of fun. They were way more fun than, like I would say, a traditional largemouth bass would be. They were, they'd go airborne, lots of aerials, and super strong.
Did you catch one to fly?
Yeah.
Well, on what?
Little yellow clouser just kind of drug along the bottom, and when they hit it, and they have teeth. And
It's official lip land only once.
Right,
one time,
right.
Yeah. One time.
Y'all got them in Virginia too?
Yeah. I caught one time fishing. I used to fish this little pond on an army base when I lived in Virginia Beach.
Yeah.
And didn't realize they were in there. It was just fun largemouth bass fishing, and I hooked one time, and I reached down to lip land it. Wow, that doesn't look like a bass mouth. It was stuck in had a bunch of moss on its head.
Yeah,
I came close to losing my thumb.
Yeah, I think the Cajuns eat them in Louisiana.
Well, there was one guy, that part of the country, the people there are so genuine, and they're so kind and nice. And
that's South Georgia.
Very charming people.
Yeah.
They just love to introduce their part of the world to people who aren't from their part of the world. And he helped me, help me pick out a John boat. I'm 6'5" and about 300 pounds. So a John boat and me, it's like tilted up, and I'm just cruising along through the swamp.
You got to have a high transom.
Exactly. So he helped me pick out the right boat, and gave me something to, just, you got to sit on this because that's going to be a hard on your tail feathers all day long. And he said they do find a way to eat them they just grind them up into fish meal and then, mix them with peppers and onions and other strong vegetables and fry
like garfish balls.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And he said that way, if you put enough sriracha on them, you can stomach them as long as, and then don't tell anybody what you're eating.
Right. Fry them hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I thought that was going to be the old smoke them on a
cedar plank
and then
eat the plank.
Right.
Yeah.
Or pack them in cow manure and roast them in the fire and then throw the fish away.
So I just tell people they're salmon.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
So, Brett, what do you got going on?
Oh, there's always something going on, and I'm over Utah, Colorado, Colorado. Why did I say that? Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming, and I've also the lucky one that gets Yellowstone. So it's kind of a special place to have in your area, and I'm sure enjoy knowing that I can get up there for work every once in a while.
Have you fished up there much?
Yeah, I did through the years. Last 35 years. I've spent some time up there. It's a really special place, and I really buy into the the efforts that TU's involved with to remove lake trout and try to preserve the Yellowstone cutthroat.
Right. I saw there's a picture the other day of it's a waterfall. I've been there, and it's the barrier for that native cutthroat restoration
On Specimen Creek.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it? And there's a impassable waterfall in there.
Yep.
Okay, that was a picture I saw. So y'all are doing that.
We are very supportive of the Yellowstone's native trout recovery plan. I don't think we have too much going on outside the lake right now in terms of, and all of that is important to note. And Brett knows this as well and can add to it. All that's volunteer stuff. We did a tour there. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
We did a tour last year after the Outdoor Writers Conference.
That's right. I did a tour when this was in Billings.
No.
I was on my way to
Alaska
and Canada and
Poor soul.
Yeah, it was horrible.
It sounds like it after the Okefenokee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I saw that that whole restoration thing. So it's been 3 years ago. We did that story on the restoration of cutthroats for Trout magazine.
Yep.
And I got to wander around and talk to everybody doing that. That project was in there.
Yeah. It's a big one. I mean, it's really important. It's kind of the holy land for cutthroat in the West.
Yeah.
You think about it, and just so many families have amazing memories of fishing there and catching cutthroat. And the lake trout there are just, some people say, well, what's the big deal? There's still fish in the lake, and you can catch them, and they get bigger. And, but the bottom line is, it's not the same fishery.
Right. They also don't run up the creek.
Well, that's exactly right. So they're not as accessible to anglers,
right.
At least not people who are used to fishing for them.
Yeah.
And then they're not accessible to grizzlies. They're not accessible to osprey and eagle and otter, because those fish stay deep.
Yeah.
And it screws up the
Are they introduced there?
They believe, illegally introduced. There was a introduction of lake trout on the other side of the Continental Divide.
Gotcha.
By the park. But those fish, they weren't sure if they were. They've tried to do some genetic testing to see if they're the same ones. And it seems like they suspect that they might be, but the greatest suspicion is that it was an illegal introduction.
Bucket biology
yes,
attack,
sir.
I was up there 2 weeks ago, and I heard some people. I was at the is it the Outlaw? Is that the pizza place in West Yellowstone? And they were saying that the fish got into Yellowstone Lake, and this could be totally true, during the '88 fires when they were taking water out of Lewis Lake.
There's lots of
spreading.
Yeah,
Interesting.
discussions about that possibility.
Yeah.
Many years ago, when I was in my previous life as a newspaper reporter, I did a story about the research, the head of research in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And he told me that they had heard numerous reports from people about a guy bragging in a bar that he had done it.
Yeah.
And that he, was taking credit for it. And there was no substantial proof that they could find to do anything about it. But that's,
Get a rope.
it's what most people think.
He had done
probably
the
most
bucket.
likely.
He wrote
Yeah.
the bucket. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate either way. It does, and that's so Dave Sweet is our project leader. He's a volunteer from Wyoming, the Wyoming Council, Trout Unlimited. Amazing guy that's sunk a ton of time and effort into raising money to help with that. Spends a lot of time up at the lake, and he tells people it's a moot point now. It doesn't matter how it happened. It only matters that they're there, and we have to deal with it.
Right.
So I don't waste too much time thinking about how it happened. I just want to take
What
care of it.
do they do with all those fish that they seine out of there?
They return them to the system.
They dump them in the woods?
They they put them back in the lake.
Yeah, they cut them up and throw them back in.
Punch a hole in the air bladder and sink them in the deepest part of the lake.
They're returning the nutrients to the lake.
Right.
And there's actually some stuff that they've started doing where they're testing some research to actually dump the dead fish on top of the lake trout spawning beds, because the decomposing robs the nutrients of for the eggs that would possibly hatch, and it makes it really hard for that to happen.
Right.
There's a lot of other cool things they're doing, trying to figure out ways to do it in a cheaper way.
Now, the cutthroat are still in there, right?
They are, and they're doing pretty well. They're recovering in such ways that people are seeing them again. For the first time last year, well, I guess 2 years in a row now, they've had grizzlies in creeks filmed eating and catching and eating cutthroat trout.
Gotcha.
And it's, so that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And anglers are starting to see them. We have one of our guys went into the thoroughfare on the south end of the system, and he was with an outfitter who had been going in there for years, and for the first time in years, he saw a 30-inch cut in there. And he was ecstatic. He's like, "Oh my gosh, it is working! It's really working!"
Right, and that connects to the lake.
Yeah.
Can you
So
imagine that?
that's what they're
30-inch
seeing.
Cutthroat?
Yeah.
Holy hell.
And that's the thing that's exciting, is that they're starting to see more spawning size fish and more smaller fish. So they're seeing that the recruitment is happening,
right?
Instead of just like that 20 to 24-inch fish, they're seeing bigger and smaller, which is really important.
Right. We talked about in the system where I fish in the back and say in the Bob Marshall, they seem to top out at 20 inches, and I've always figured, and there was some kind of a deal where the forest fire there added some kind of nutrients, and there was a pulse where they got bigger. Nobody seems to know. I mean, it might just be anecdotal. But
those weird natural...
Why do you think that's true? Like when we were in that Clearwater trip, right?
Right.
The biggest one in there is 18. And I mean, that's it. You'll catch big fish, and they're all 18. But there's obviously potential that they can be bigger because they get bigger.
Well, you hear biologists talk about the bottleneck. They get to a certain size, and they have to make the transition to another food prey, to another food reliability. Right. So that, like in a lake trout, it'd be going from, say, small rainbows and stuff to then feeding on carp.
Right.
Or kokanee or something. So they're actually able to
get
bigger food. It helps them elevate to the next size range, and maybe there's a stunted thing even there.
Remember, too, before the Dworshak Dam went in, you used to get salmon steelhead up in there, which means you had baby salmon and baby steelhead up in there. And I would imagine before the dam went in that those cutthroats were... They were probably fish eaters as much as they were grasshopper eaters.
So those animals, those fish still exist, right? They're just trapped by Dworshak. Is there anything left of that run?
No. Well, they can bang their noses on the base of the dam as far as they can go.
Yep.
But upstream, you still have bull trout probably saw some.
Right, you bet.
They're bull trout in the upper Clearwater, Kelly Creek, Cayuse Creek, those places that have massive bull trout, and they are piscivores. They do eat fish.
We talk about the laws of unintended consequences. For years, everybody tried to figure out what happened, why the Clearwater Basin was running out of the elk. You know, the elk were on the ropes, and there were super packs of wolves in there, huge packs of wolves. Right, it leveled out, but for a while. And everybody's going to remember the 1912 fire had grown up, and everybody in there was freaking out. So there wasn't enough game and all this stuff. And I don't know that this is anecdotal too, but I was on a trip with James Estes, who's sort of the founder of Crowfoot Cascades biology, and the idea that you take the keystone predator out and the arch collapse. And Estes is an elk hunter to the max. And he's old enough to have hunted that Clearwater country pre-Dworshak. And he told me that the winter range that they went through to get to the high country is now under Dworshak Reservoir. He said, how could you have the same numbers of elk? It's a forest. It's not a winter range, you know. And he said everybody was, and he didn't have a dog in that fight. I mean, but he just said, I mean, we backpacked through the winter range, which is now under the reservoir.
Keep in mind too that was the last big fire. Was
right.
1912.
That's the 12, right?
The Great Burn. It hasn't burned since,
right?
And to any great degree. Yeah. And that's those burns open up habitat. They make things better. So. Then they reintroduce the wolves on top of these elk, which are on top of this marginal habitat.
Right.
Sure, there's going to be problems.
Right. Yeah, it's a
pretty deep stuff for a trout guy, but
hey, you got to go with what you know. Yeah, I just would love to see that. Everybody told me about those steelhead that ran up Dworshak, and it was some kind of super race of steelhead,
it's
right?
B-run, the big 30-inch fish that were they don't go there anymore.
Yeah, imagine this creek is unbelievably beautiful. You ever been in there?
Into the Bob?
Yeah, no. This would be Kelly Creek, like out in south central Idaho.
No, it'd be north central Idaho.
North central Idaho.
Like
you go over the Bitterroots.
Yeah.
I haven't been in there.
It's one of the most interesting places there is. I mean, it's Cayuse Creek comes into Kelly, and they just get. What would you say, 60, 70 feet across, probably?
Yeah,
it's carrying. Yeah, it's weightable. It's carrying a hell of a head of water, though.
Yeah.
That's a little different country than what I'm used to.
Yeah, they don't have that.
We got some rugged country out in the east. But
Mark takes reporters on media trips on the East Coast and in Virginia, and instead of finding great big fish, he finds dead bodies on the side of the road.
That actually is true.
Did you keep the skull?
No, it's a true story. Actually, we were on the we were in the Great Smoky Mountains. No, we were on the Blue Ridge Parkway actually down in North Carolina, and we had a couple folks with the Flyman Fishing Company. We were out doing a video on some of the small brook trout streams up there, and we stopped at this overlook to do some videos, interviews, and there was a car parked on the other side of the parking lot, and I looked over there, and as soon as we parked, this guy jumps out of the car and hustles over to us, and my former coworker Damon Hearn, who managed our North Carolina program at the time, said that guy's coming over here with a purpose, and the guy hustled up. We rolled down the window, and he said, "I think there's a body over there." And so there was a purpose. He had found a body, so we got out of the car.
Either there is or there ain't, pal. We're trying to go fishing.
there was a body over in the grass at this overlook. So that we had to delay our interviews for about 45 minutes until the local volunteers got there and took care of it. But it was
what happened to them?
It was
unfortunate.
Unfortunately, it was a suicide. Uh-huh. Yeah, this was a very beautiful overlook, and it turns out one of the guys who came, one of the first responders, said it happens actually pretty frequently. He said just a year ago they had another one in the exact same spot. Uh-huh. So, yeah, just kind of a sobering way to start the day, you know. Sure. But then you sort of puts things in perspective as you go out and fish this these beautiful mountain streams,
Right.
and realize how fortunate we are to have that, and
Right.
Dude should have spent more time fishing.
yeah,
Obviously.
yeah. Who knows what was going on there, but yeah. So
Where was that?
that was down outside Brevard, North Carolina.
Yeah.
That's it, and it actually is rugged country down there.
Oh,
The
man.
mountains. When you talk about going from the valleys up to the peaks,
Yeah.
you're 5,000-6,000
we
feet.
we spend so much time on Looking Glass
yeah.
up there, and the Shining Rock Wilderness fishing those little brookies,
Oh yeah.
and there you throw an ant pattern, and like it was that was my. So when we wanted mountains from Alabama, that's where we went.
Yeah.
And so the Davidson, I saw these old guys all dressed up in fly fishing accoutrements. I'd never seen that. I mean, they were really decked out, and they were very old, and they walked real slow, and they were fishing these tiny bugs, and they didn't keep the fish, but he had caught. I can't remember how he did this because it was way pre-digital, but he had caught this 18-inch brown, deep brown, and in the Davidson. And right there, and they were having they had some kind of hella good like whiskey, and they were having like an after fishing drink. Now in the West with fly fishing, you do a lot of drinking and having some nice whiskeys and stuff. But I was like 18 or 19. I'd never seen this fishing culture.
Yeah.
And these guys were in it, man, and they were. It was really cool. It was a revelation to me. Because we had fly rods, but we had the ones that you had a electric,
the little,
automatic
automatic.
reel, a Perrine.
So that was what really set the hook for you then.
It was.
The after
It's
catch drink.
It's a combination of fishing and hunting. You pull the trigger on the fish.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah,
Was he
it's
Then
wearing-
you can, and then and we always would go drinking anyway.
Well, yeah.
Even well, hopefully, but it was.
Was he
it
wearing
just
tweed and smoking a pipe? And
close? But he was. It
his best
wasn't.
friend, he all started all of his conversations with, "My good man."
But I think the thing that would impress me was I had friends with me, and we did not find them ridiculous. It was cool.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting. Everybody was a fisherman, but
It
they
was
weren't that kind
appropriate.
of fisherman. It seemed appropriate.
So that area now has become sort of a hot spot for the young flat brim trucker hat, hip tattooed fly
fishers?
fishermen. Oh
Wow.
yeah, it's big time culture down there.
They've given up the tweed.
Southern culture on the fly. These guys are they're but the drinking is the one consistency.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Except I think they drink PBR and maybe some microbrews. So,
Sure.
Nothing wrong with PBR, let me tell you.
These are the children of the guys you saw.
Grandchildren.
yeah, probably
Yeah,
so.
the grandchildren for sure. They've tossed the tweed, but
The fishing is probably fishing is still really good there.
Yeah.
And maybe better than ever. I mean, we're doing a lot of work. One of the issues down there, of course, is culvert problems with a lot of perch culverts. So these fish cannot get they can't utilize all the habitat. So we're going in there and we have crews pulling out some of these old culverts and reconnecting the streams. So instead of having 2-3 mile sections, you got a 6 mile section.
Right.
And it's important because that's some of the best habitat actually in the east.
So I have thinking about this is probably not a good topic here, but when I think about how much rain comes down there, right? And then so your culvert has a plunge,
Yeah.
and it's actually isolating itself from the creek through erosion every time it
Absolutely.
comes a downpour, right?
Yeah, one of the issues. So that's a big obvious issue right there.
Yeah.
You've basically disconnected that habitat. But one of the other problems is a lot of those culverts they're not designed for the amount of water that can come in
Right.
during heavy rain events.
Right.
So you have major flooding issues, and one of the things we run into frequently up and down throughout the east is undersized culverts that flood out and roads wash out, and localities come in to fix it, to reconnect the road, and they put in the same exact size culvert.
Sure.
And so
Or
what
they-
we're working with folks to try to say let's look at the models and figure out how this culvert
Right.
can survive a 100-year flood.
Right.
So we fix the flooding problems and we reconnect the habitat. And there was a cool story a couple years ago, one of these projects in North Carolina, where we actually had brook trout using the side channel that we had put in to to deflect the water while the new culvert was going in. So these fish were already like, damn, I got 3 miles of stream. I'm heading up.
Right. Sure.
And right there, we were watching it happen.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And we go out there with electrofishing crews and shock these streams and are finding populations of trout where there were no trout previously, and so it's working. And
your native brookies.
Yeah, we do it. It depends on the stream.
Right.
A lot of it is native brook trout, but some of it is just wild populations of fish, and it just depends. So wild rainbows and wild browns too, but we are focusing pretty heavily on the native brook trout. Because they're natives,
right?
And they've got enough challenges going on, so we're trying to help them out as best we can. It kind of helps us prioritize our efforts.
Right.
We had a similar reconnection project in Utah last fall, where we had an interstate that had been constructed more than 50 years ago, 385-foot long concrete culvert underneath the highway that the fish could never, ever get up.
Yeah.
So 2 miles of headwater to a main river, the Weber River, was cut off. Every year, fish would stage right at the end of that culvert trying to get up there, and they couldn't.
Right.
So our guy on the scene had identified the issue and said, what can we do? And so they constructed a 385-foot long fish ladder that we mounted against the walls.
Wow.
And for me, it was really rewarding to cover it and help. We actually helped raise money for it through a new program called Utah Cutthroat Slam, which raised money to help fund that program.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was really fun to get up there and be swinging the sledgehammer and mounting that, that prefabricated ladder onto the thing. And I asked one of the biologists, we were partners with the Utah Division of Wildlife in that, and I said, in the other time when these fish were trying to get up there, how far could they have really gone the way it is? Because there's just no place for them to hold. It was like a 10% grade.
Yeah.
There was no way they could go anywhere near the end of that. And he said 10 feet. During high water, when the fish are trying to move up, that's as far as they could go before they got pushed right back down, because there was nowhere for them to hide out of that fast water.
Right.
And this ladder just allows them to go up. And so there were fish with telemetry in them already in the main stem of the Weber. And we've already got like 20 fish that have come up past stations that we've tracked. And one of the coolest things about the whole deal was when we were putting in the ladder, this woman was out on a walk. She lives in the area. And she said, what are you guys doing? And so we're just putting in this ladder to make it so fish can get back up there. And she said, she like basically started crying. She's like, I haven't seen cutthroat in this creek for 40 years.
Wow.
She said, oh, that's so great. She was so excited. And so it's fun to, I have no idea if she ever fished or not, but she sure likes seeing those fish in her community.
Yeah.
Did you say she was out on a walk?
Sorry.
I think that's one of the coolest things we do, not just in Utah or North Carolina, but all over the country, is opening habitat up for fish that have been gone for generations, like on the Penobscot in Maine.
Right.
There's a story just this week from New Jersey, of all places. Excuse me.
New Jersey, of all places.
You did a blog post on this about the Musconetcong River.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that correct?
Yeah.
The Muskie, where they took out the Hughesville Dam, opened up miles and miles of habitat, and now they're American shad above where the dam used to be. They haven't been there in who knows how long, since the Hughesville Dam went in hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
I think they said that river, I should remember because I wrote it, but
I was trying to give you a plug, and you're like completely worthless. You just sit there and be quiet for a
700
while.
years. They have it dated
A million years. Yeah.
It did.
And now they're flopping everywhere.
Well, actually, I didn't write it. It was written by one of our field staff.
You edited it.
I edited it.
There you go.
So
Big difference.
Yeah.
True.
So he
Very true.
He did mention that the colonial days, like pre-Revolutionary War days, they relied on shad. It was a big food fish,
right?
And these shad helped get General Washington and his troops through the winter.
At Valley Forge?
At Valley Forge. And then they
Really?
dammed the river.
Right.
And the shad went away, but
That's the last time we're camping here.
Yeah, exactly. They served their purpose. Let's plug it up.
But the same is true on the Penobscot, where over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been a part of a coalition that's taken out 2 dams and put in a fish passage around a 3rd dam.
Right. And fix the fish lift. On
right.
the 4th
And now we're actually getting Atlantic salmon that used to come into the Penobscot and had just a few miles of habitat. And now they've got over 1,000 miles of habitat. Now we're not seeing a huge rush of Atlantic salmon, but we're seeing hundreds, which is
instead of none.
Instead of 0.
Nothing.
Yeah. But also sturgeon, shad, striped bass, herring,
Eels.
the lampreys.
Yeah.
You take it. Yeah. What's that? If you're against a dam, you're for a river.
Yeah, one of the challenges we have in
the
the Northeast with some of those dams is a lot of these little dams on these little streams serve no function whatsoever, no practical function. So they dam up a little creek, and they make a little pond, and the pond has a bunch of swans swimming around in it.
Right.
And it's like they're part of these little towns' culture and part of their community.
Right, the pond.
Right. It's like a center for the community.
Sure.
And so we go in there and we try to convince people that it's a good thing to get rid of these dams. And a lot of these dams are under disrepair, and they either need very expensive repair or they need to be torn down.
Right.
But they don't want to tear these dams down because it's the city pond.
Right.
Well, what that pond does is it warms up the water because it's
silted in,
and it's so it's really nasty. And then the water downstream is worthless because it's warm going in.
Right.
But the people don't want to see. They don't want to see their ponds go away.
Right.
Occasionally, we can work something through. We recently did this, and this was a TU volunteer-led effort in Pennsylvania on a little creek called Aquatong. Mm-hmm. And there was a dam that this township owned, and they wanted to repair it. And the 25-acre reservoir, the only reason it was there was for fishing, a little swimming beach and maybe some sunfish. But it was damming up a spring creek. Uh-huh. Well, eventually the city realized that they couldn't fix the dam, so they took it out and created a 3-mile-long spring creek. It's a tributary to the Lehigh River. And volunteers went into a couple other little tributaries and caught 50 wild brook trout, put them in coolers, and with the proper permits, I should say.
Got put a bunch of lake trout in there.
They transferred these fish to this little spring creek and threw them out there. And within 5 minutes, one of the guys saw one of these little 3-inch brook trout rising for an insect on this creek. So that was kind of a cool, a thing that shows this is what happened if you get rid of these little.
Where is that?
That's in eastern Pennsylvania.
Gotcha.
So a little tiny tributary to the Lehigh River, which is a tributary to the Delaware. Spring fed, but fairly robust.
Right.
And it's in Bucks County, and those are the only native brook trout now in Bucks County. Right. So, and we'll see how it works out, but it
should better than it was.
Better than it was. That's right.
It's remember amazing. When the Milltown Dam was? I mean, were you old enough to remember when that Milltown and they were like, so Milltown had almost 100 years of toxic mine drainage settlement behind it. And
where was this? What state?
It's near Missoula, Montana.
Oh, okay.
And it blocks the Blackfoot and the Clark Fork. It was built by like William Clark back in the Copper Baron days for to power a mill that cut the timber that shored up the mines. Pretty much, right? And
it's one bad idea after another bad idea.
And it's
like a host of bad ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it had been sitting there for so long, and then all the tailings come down the Clark Fork and piled up behind this thing. So it was a toxic nightmare.
Yeah.
And I remember they had hearings, and they talked, and people thought it couldn't be done. It'll kill the Clark Fork all the way clear down to the Columbia. It can't be done, all this stuff. And I remember there was a big protest. We were thinking about the town pond idea. And I remember in the Missoula, there's a picture of this guy, old, not really an old guy. He's holding up his side and said, "Kill the hippies, save the dam." And this dam, it did nothing but capture toxic sediment and like imperil the entire, like, kill the hippies, save the dam.
Did it have swans on it though?
I doubt it.
Yeah, they were
glowing.
Orange swans.
There were some fish in there, like some pike or something. I remember somebody said, "My pike fishing in my backyard is going to be ruined." There was a few pike that stayed above the tailings,
but they're not native.
There are pike in the Clark Fork and the Bitterroot now too.
There's a lot of a lot down all the way like Lolo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at the Lolo Bridge and Florence Bridge in the Bitterroot, and a buddy of mine pulled out in a canoe, and he had 6 big old largemouth. And,
Largemouth from the Bitterroot?
Yep, and the game warden was down there, and he was like, well, let's see, let's talk. And this guy's semi-outlaw, And he said, he looked at him, and he just like, it wasn't any regulation, right? But they poured out of the Lee Metcalf refuge.
Yeah.
And they established themselves down there. It's just a warming world. I mean, those rivers. But that dam takeout, it was an economic explosion for that part of the country. I know people who they did they built restoration businesses around that. The excavators they had years worth of work carefully removing all that poisonous stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Hal, because that's one thing that I try to tell people is that restoration work isn't just about fixing things. In a lot of cases, it's about creating jobs. It really is an economic driver.
This was an economic explosion.
Yeah.
I mean, it carried on and on and on, and to this now, people are buying land. I mean, there's a whitewater deal there, and you can say, oh, that's all them groovy people, and it's New West or whatever, And I used to have a job at that mill, but that mill's actually got some work going on in it too at Bonner, but it's also got all this value because those rivers are unblocked. And it's super beautiful. Like the whole thing is it's 1,000 times better than it was. Let's face it.
Well, of course, the other side of that too is restoration does put people to work, but the better alternative is still not having to do it.
Yeah,
it would be.
Right.
Let's protect it so we don't have to fix it in the long term.
Right? Did y'all go to that thing?
I was just going to bring that up. That was brought up in our session,
and that was brought up to me about Butte one time. I was kind of downing on the Berkeley pit, which you're not supposed to do in Butte, and somebody said, that copper won World War II, boy. You'd be speaking German. And I was like, oh, okay, I still wish it
Gesundheit.
Perhaps we could have extracted the copper in somewhat less of a destructive way and still won, But I took his point. Point taken. Yeah, point taken.
They still have mining up there. I was just up there in April to check it out, and every year I go, the water gets a little bit higher, a little bit higher. It's pretty terrifying if you look at the empty pit and now see the blue water that's full.
Yeah,
it's and the blue-green.
The snow geese land under it every winter and died immediately. It's really extreme.
The thing that's important to remember that I think that you talked about in your session today was that if we know how to responsibly do it, maybe there are still things that should be done and can be done, but it should be done responsibly. And if we know the best science to do it correctly or in the least, damaging way, we should do that. But it seems like, that a lot of people think that's spending too much money to make it happen. But as was pointed out today, if, we're all the projects that are going on around here in Duluth, if they didn't have to do it, it would have saved a lot of money that they could be spending on other things.
And yes, there was a lot of money made initially, but it could have. We know now, like when you're 21 years, or say you're 17, you drive your car 120 mile an hour around the thing. It's super fun. And then you wipe out, bite off. In my case, I bit off my tongue, and you're all smashed, And so the next time you go around that curve, you go out and do it 65, and you don't just go around the curve 120 times, bite your tongue off every time, So that's what I see as that mining stuff. And you can mine.
Learn.
And also you can mine, and you have established reclamation bonds that are so ironclad that the people can't just run off and leave them.
Yeah,
I mean,
we have the science.
Lord.
We know.
We
better.
have an idea how this.
All of
work.
the information is in. All the data is in, and yet they still want to dig pebble mine in Alaska.
Right.
Right. It goes beyond science. We all know that. Especially
that one goes
around
beyond
this
science,
table,
for sure.
Politics plays a significant role in our environmental policies around this country, and we've been fighting pebble since before I got to TU 12 years ago.
Right.
It's the gift that keeps on.
Well, you're tempted in that case to say it's about money, right? and the
Well,
value.
everybody
but
can talk about it in terms of different metrics. It's money, it's jobs, it's whatever. But we look at it as we look at it through the same lens. It's 14,000 fisheries jobs and
right. Well,
$800
that's the
million
thing
to
is,
the Alaskan economy.
and this was brought up in a session today earlier too, and this idea that trying to find the right combination of putting a price tag on everything, because that seems to be the only thing that the powers that be care about is, all right, well, what's it worth? So what are the salmon worth? Well, that's almost impossible to put a price tag on, but we can make all this money on the mining and the gold and whatever. So that's easier to see.
I would play it straight to. We also talked about today how say the Clean Water Act stuff, the Waters of U.S. thing. The opponents of the Waters of U.S. played on emotion. They said they're coming out. They're gonna regulate puddles in your driveway. Mm-hmm. And this was a patent falsehood.
Absolutely, and not true at all.
A series of blatant falsehoods, but they each spiked a different emotion. And I myself am a person who likes to be left alone. And I don't like regulation, and I don't like people messing with me. And so I understood. I realized that those were blatant falsehoods, but I also understood the power of that. A friend of mine from Alabama called me, and he said, if this passes, and he's a great guy, but I would say he was sort of a victim of right-wing, like Breitbart-style propaganda, which I didn't know much about at this time. And he called me, and he said, if this passes, we're not even going to be able to fish at your daddy's pond, man, where we've been going forever. And I said, man, I can't believe that. I'm going to check it out, And he had seen a YouTube video of the anti-Waters of U.S. people had put out. But it was blatant emotion, okay? Mm-hmm. So I would like to say, when I was on the Mulchatna River in the Coctoolie and looking at Tulare Creek up there at the Pebble Mine site, or Jackrabbit Hills, we went up there for a story. It's been a long time ago. That place vibrates at a natural energy level, like no place I've ever been. Right? There's something going on that's almost like another reality. The salmon show up. The guy told me it was like turning up the volume on a stereo. There's a little splashing going on, and then the next day there's like a bear, and the next day you could hear the wolves. Everything's following this. Wow. Thing. And I wonder why people don't have an equally visceral and powerful emotional response to the idea that would be sacrificed for the short-term profits of a relative few.
Not just a relative few, but a relative few from other countries.
Right, but so why would that not make people as angry as the idea of regulating, like a false idea of regulating a puzzle in your driveway?
I think there's such a small percentage of the American population who has been or will go to that region.
Okay.
It is so remote, so hard to even fathom. If you haven't been there, or if you don't know what you're
and I got to admit, I couldn't have afforded to go there had I not been flown there for a story.
Right.
Yeah.
It is not cheap. Yeah. To get up there and do a week of fishing at a lodge is north of $5,000. Mm-hmm. And it's a trip of a lifetime. It's but not a lot of people do that.
And everybody can relate to the farm pond, and so when someone plays on that fear, and you got to give some credit to the folks who came up with that campaign because patent falsehood.
I mean, in the same way you give credit to guys who hired those people to put on white coats and smoke cigarettes and say, I'm a doctor and I smoke this.
Yeah.
So it's funny, you said that about the you won't be able to fish in your buddy's pond anymore.
Right.
I was talking about this at the brown bag lunch today here. And I have some ranching friends and the Bears Ears National Monument, and in Utah, and they posted on some social media that they were feeling bad for their friends that were ranchers in the Bears Ears area. Yeah. And they said, and I sent them a private message and I said, why are you saying that? And they said, well, I just feel bad for them. It's horrible. They're going to lose their livelihood. And I said, they're not going to lose their livelihood. They're locked in now. They're probably going to benefit from this
in a way that they didn't before, right?
That's exactly right. So, and she's like, no, I don't think that's true. And I said, talk to them, find out. And she got back to me. She said, you're right. They're not upset.
Right.
Fear and hysteria is easier to, I don't know, it catches on easier than common sense and pragmatism.
become
like the Johnny
political.
Cash song.
Yeah.
Bad news travels like wildfire.
Yeah, it's
Good
become
news
political
travels
currency now.
Right.
It's unfortunate. So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with all that said, I think one of the things we talked about today is people have an expectation of having brook trout in the east and native brook trout in there, and they're willing to volunteer to replace a culvert. There's got to be some way forward. Utilizing the power of the American people. How many of them are there? I don't know. When we did that thing on the Roan Plateau, that creek restoration was spectacularly successful, and it didn't take that long.
no, it was a pretty light lift,
Yeah,
but that we won that. That was a win. We chalked that up in the good guys win column. Everybody kind of got what they wanted out of that. They redid the leases. For background, the Roan is a great little spot, kind of a hidden wonderland in western Colorado that was leased for oil and gas right on top of a couple of streams that had a very unique strain of Colorado River cutthroat trout that sort of evolved above a series of waterfalls. And we were lucky enough to take Hal in there, probably 7 or 8 years ago.
7 or 8 years. When you're standing on the Roan, you can look off of it and rifle Colorado's down below you.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be down below you about 9,000 feet, right?
Well, it wouldn't be that far, but it's
top,
way down there.
Yeah, the top of the Roan is plastered with snow when you're in a T-shirt in rifle.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, and it is the snowpack. And so, it's important in a lot of different ways, even more than those unique fish. Like
right.
You couldn't believe anybody had.
Well, what did we see when we went in there? I mean, I'd been doing tours on the Roan for years. It's the first. I've lived in the West my entire life. It's the only place I've seen a mountain lion. I've seen the largest inland black bear I've ever seen on the Roan Plateau. Bachelor herds of elk in the middle of summer that are hundreds strong. Mule deer, turkeys, grouse.
Right.
It is a wonderland. It is like a little oasis in the middle of the desert.
Right.
And these fish are just so special. And you walk down there and take one cast and you were on a fish.
You bet.
And the outcome, which was good, was we got those leases pulled back and then reissued in ways that the companies were still able to access natural gas, but they had to use directional drilling rather than putting drill rigs right on top of those trout streams. So with that, we like those outcomes where people collaborate and the solution comes together.
Right.
And the Roan is a perfect example of how that works.
It was getting hit pretty hard. Before that. It was, you fly over it and you're like, oh man, because you got to move so much dirt to get a drilling pad in and the associated road network and the haul roads. It was getting pretty battered right there, man.
Some of those little roads that we drove down, can you imagine, an 18-wheel water tender coming in or a pipe truck or a mud truck coming in?
Yeah.
Holy crap. That would have been a
can't.
disaster.
You just have to change you'd have to change the landscape in a fundamental, permanent way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reclaiming that.
Nope.
And there's this place in there where you hike way down, straight down. You lose must be 1,000-foot elevation, and you're coming off of this. There's aspen trees up there that are 25 inches at the butt. With carvings from sheep herders from a long time ago. But you drop this into this thing, and it's this fern hung grotto.
Yeah.
And with waterfalls and it's tumbling, it's real hot there, right? It's you drop into this thing and it's like you've moved a portal into another dimension, and the fish are there big time.
They are.
Now, are those is it spring fed or is it runoff?
There are springs up that start up high, and what's cool about the Roan is that the springs come in at various points. You can see like the rock walls that Hal's telling me, they just kind of weep with spring water that comes in.
So they're covered with these like mosses and sort of semi-aquatic plants. I mean, it's really like being in another world.
Shangri-La.
It's a total micro ecosystem, micro environment.
Right.
I don't know what, but the fish are in there, and then there are streams in there that had introduced brook trout. And I think that the next step, using some of the funding we got from the settlement in Colorado Trout Unlimited, is to work to remove those non-native fish and bring cutthroats back to all those places, which would be, wonderful.
Because you've got the built-in barrier. I mean, there's nothing going up there.
Yeah,
you
those
know?
waterfalls are 100 feet tall. Yeah, there's nothing. No fish I know can make that jump.
Right. and people really were treating the industry was treating it rough. It was that mud sickle that flowed over the waterfall from the spill of the truck turned over. I mean, it wasn't good working out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had jumped a bunch of drilling mud into Parachute Creek, and then some poor guy had a hunting cabin on Lower Parachute Creek, and he got into his well water. And
Oh, really?
typical, this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're dealing with that in the east right now with the shale gas.
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that caught us by surprise when it really took off because
Right.
it happened so fast. And we were playing catch up there for a few years, and the drilling has largely been done in a lot of those places in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. But we're watching pretty carefully now with a lot of the infrastructure stuff and the proposed pipelines.
The pipeline
yeah,
thing.
keeping our eyes
my
on that
sister
stuff.
y'all have a Citizens Water. What is this? My sister's doing water testing Cow Pasture River, Calf Pasture River.
Yeah, we have water monitors at a volunteer water monitoring
Right.
program in place in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia.
Yeah, my sister and my nephew are doing that.
Yeah, so it's really cool. We've trained more than 600 people to go out, and these are all volunteers. They go out and a couple times a month check these streams, take samples, and again, it's largely right now baseline information in Virginia and West Virginia because a lot of the pipeline work hasn't started yet. It's
Right.
proposed, but we're gathering that information. But in Pennsylvania, they're working in areas where this infrastructure is in place. The good news is, so far so good. We're not finding a lot of issues. We found a few with construction and some poor practices with erosion, but generally speaking, it's been good. But they know we're out there, and it's
Right.
a small army of volunteers.
There's a pretty cool video on that program, isn't there?
Yeah, we did a piece started. We were actually in West Virginia filming. West Virginia and Virginia filming that on November 8th. We filmed. We were out in the wilds of West Virginia filming some volunteers taking some water samples around the Fayetteville area, a big climbing spot on the New River Gorge.
Oh yeah.
And then the filmmaker, my buddy Sam Dean, and I went out to have a few beers. And Jake Lemon, who's our monitoring coordinator, the guy who runs the program, the TU staff, we were having a few beers watching the election results roll in.
Oh,
that was an interesting evening.
I bet it was.
In West Virginia. Yeah. So
There's great fishing there in places, right?
in West Virginia. Yeah. I mean, there's. It depends on where you are, but yeah, the Upper Potomac area, some of those streams up there, the South Branch itself, and some of the small creeks that are coming off National Forest in the Monongahela, the Greenbrier River system. We're doing a lot of work up in there. Really good fishing, native brook trout, and some introduced browns.
Yeah.
In that, and wild rainbows too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good fishing through there, and of course Pennsylvania is incredible with its wild trout fisheries. It's actually got I learned this recently, second most miles of flowing water of any of the states, second only to Alaska.
Yeah, that's more than Montana, more than Idaho, more than Colorado.
And that's
And
because it's at the Adirondacks. I mean, not the Adirondacks in there. What is that? The Alleghenies?
Yeah, the Alleghenies run up through Pennsylvania, but a lot of the and so there's native brook trout up in there, but of course a lot of the Pennsylvania fishing is in the east with the spring creeks.
Gotcha.
It's limestone country, and Pennsylvania is TU's biggest membership state. Actually, we have 48 chapters and I think 14,000 members.
Wow.
And I can see why when I go up there, because the fishing is really incredible. And one of the challenges is it's the paradox of great fishing. You also have a lot of people
doing it.
It's hard to get away up there, but some of I recently fished Spring Creek right outside State College, and it's just it was pretty spectacular.
Huh.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania's a cool state. Maine is another one of our special places out in the east with the brook trout ponds.
Right.
So it's got 90% of the stillwater brook trout habitat in the east. So those ponds are pretty cool. And
I remember those pictures. I've seen pictures of those super lit up brook trout, Maine.
Oh, they're good. They're gorgeous. And there's some big fish in Maine. I mean, some of those ponds can grow some 18, 20-inch wild brookies.
Yeah.
And the other thing that a lot of people don't know about is there's actually populations on the northeast coast of what we call salter brook trout.
Yeah.
They're little anadromous fish that they move in and out of salt water up into these little coastal streams. And they're not, when I was recently up there and I kind of thought I was going to go experience something like the coastal cutthroats in the Pacific Northwest where I grew up, fishing for big 18, 20-inch sea run cuts. But a lot of these salters are 6-8 inches long. They're like the Appalachian Mountain natives. They're just tiny fish, but we don't know a lot about them. So we're actually in the process of we got volunteers out fishing a lot of these coastal streams, trying to figure out if the salters are still there. And then as we get that information, we'll hopefully be using that to get make some progress with regulations and protections because they're pretty neat little fish.
I bet. Yeah, we caught that one sea run cutthroat on that Alaska trip. And it was smaller in my hand.
Yep.
But I caught it.
Oh, okay.
I was like,
coolest fish you caught all trip.
It was pretty cool. And then those sea run dollies,
aren't they something?
They were coming in and out of the salt too.
Yeah.
But they were all going, we're going to catch these sea run cutthroat. And I'd never heard of that really,
Yeah. Harvest trout. That's what they call them. That's what they call them down in Oregon. And it was big
when I was out in the ocean.
Yeah, they were anadromous, and those fish actually would come back in to spawn. So they were. Now these salters up in the Northeast, they're in and out. They just kind of follow the food.
Yeah,
and it's kind of cool. We're doing some studies on a stream in Massachusetts called Red Brook, where we've implanted a bunch of these little native these brook trout with pit tags.
Yeah,
and we're studying their movements in this creek. We've got several sites where we're what's the word I'm looking for here? Well, I mean tracking. I mean they basically ping every time the fish goes through.
It's a telemetry.
Yeah, it's a telemetry thing, and I don't know what the official name is for Anyway, we're finding out these fish are moving, and we also did a GPS related study, which was kind of cool because it was really expensive to implant GPS tags on these fish, so we didn't do a whole lot. We did this in conjunction with the Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition.
Yeah.
We actually tracked one of these fish to the Chesapeake Bay. Of course, the fish didn't swim down there. It got eaten by a striper.
Oh, wow, cool.
So,
he's heading out.
Where'd number 27 go?
It's outside of Virginia Beach.
It's down on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, and Taylor's down there throwing a 12-inch long deceiver at him.
Yeah. He's on a ride.
So that fish didn't make it. But
well, that's one of the things we were interested in doing, like with these talks was just like getting, like I had Brandon Butler from Missouri the other day, and there's just all this stuff right on the East Coast, Missouri. You go there's just everywhere you go in the United States, there's people that are like energetically hunting and fishing, but they're part of it. And I think there's probably no place where there's not something incredible happening. I mean,
I say about these conferences, we have them in a variety of places. We've had them in Alaska, Florida. We had one in my hometown in Virginia. There's no place that we've had one of these conferences that I've come to that I can't find a redeeming quality to. I mean, there's always something good to do wherever these are, fishing and hunting related or whatever it might be.
We were down at the Poma thing in Shreveport, meeting some folks there for these, and it's incredible there. The bass fishing, the Kisatchie National Forest.
Talk about blackwater swamps, Caddo Lake.
Yeah, what's it called? Caddo Lake, right?
I think it's the only natural lake in all of East Texas. It's on the Louisiana border. It's pretty cool country.
And it's probably a cut off oxbow, right?
I think so, of the Sabine system. I think that's what it was. But years and years ago, the Corps of Engineers went in there and everything's different.
Yeah, right. Well, it's just like I meet people everywhere. I'd like to see Reelfoot down there, which was cut off part of the Mississippi during the New Madrid earthquake. You know, and it just and you can't even really get started in the West. Like, I don't know, Utah. I have my whole experience of Utah is being in a crew truck driving to Black Mesa coal mine to go to work, and we blast down whatever the I-15 corridor past the giant penitentiary and through all the air pollution of Salt Lake, and we were trying to get out of there so we wouldn't have to drink 3.2 beer. We could get across the line. I mean, that's and so there's just like the vastness of Utah. I ain't. How do you know? I've never even started on it.
Oh, it's it's pretty epic. There's a lot of different climates there. And
right.
It's really fun to as a native, it's fun to be able to head south in the winter and then come back up north and enjoy the summer and find that shoulder season in between to enjoy both of them.
Are you from there?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
The Salt Laker.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right in the valley.
Cool.
You're right, though. There are very few things in this world that are utterly useless. So I will say that 3.2 beer is
right, for sure. It can get you real fat. You can't get a buzz on it.
I didn't even know that was a real thing.
We're not the only state that has that.
Florida has it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in college, and you'd haul Alabama beer to Florida just for having to drink it.
Well, yeah, the Wyoming border is pretty close.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, we probably about an hour in, so if y'all want to anything you can think of that you want to leave with, I've been.
The last part of this conversation it was just kind of reminded me that, I realized this in 12 plus years of working for Trout Unlimited, that anybody who trout fishes has likely come in contact with TU, although they may not know it.
Right.
There's probably not a trout drainage in this country where we haven't done something, and that is an immense source of pride for me and a lot of us who work for TU. The notion of our little our hashtag on our blog and on our social media is make fishing better.
Yeah,
but it's true. We totally do. That's what we do. And culvert removal, dam removal, restoration work, protection work, everything that we've done, everything over the last almost 60 years that TU has touched, has likely done exactly that. We've made fishing better, not just for us trout fishermen and our Tweety guys who smoke pipes. And,
right. I'm all for them.
And look down at everybody else who dunks bait, whatever.
For the guys downstream, because the work we're doing upstream makes a difference downstream for smallmouth or even the Chesapeake Bay.
Right.
Or people.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now.
There you go. Anybody who turns on a tap?
Yeah, anybody turns on
You're
a tap.
welcome.
And when you walk up there on that Roan Plateau and you see those restored creeks, I mean, you feel that the place is doing. It's just full of power, full of life. I mean, that thing works, and in stream. I mean, we'll go get into this one right now, but there's a great guy. There's a big movement in Montana. Not a big movement. It's just to get us a minimum in stream flow.
Yeah.
And I just I cannot see the argument against that. I mean, you'd have to spin me upside down and like put a blowtorch on me to make me change my mind that a minimum in-stream flow law for the state of Montana is a bad idea.
Right.
I mean, good Lord have mercy. So, we had the Yellowstone, last year.
Right.
We had the fish kill. We just got it's to whom much is given, much is expected. And one of the things that we're given is one of the greatest, all of us, all through the West, all through the East, you're given this incredible thing. And so how do you keep it, and then one of the things is we probably, raise your little hand and say, get a minimum in-stream flow law. And it's,
if it were only that simple, because every Montanan who understands how fishing works and what, how, again, we had this conversation at lunch. Every time we've tried to prove that, water doesn't flow downhill, we're wrong. It does flow downhill no matter what we do.
Right.
It's going to end up, if you, this was the whole waters of the U.S. thing,
right?
Connecting those ephemeral streams to those big rivers.
Right.
I'll be darned. I poured water up here last Tuesday and it went downhill, and then I did it again today and it went downhill.
Right.
It's going to go downhill.
There's a pattern for
Right.
it.
There's something significant.
Let's
about
study
that.
it for 10 years to make
Yeah,
sure it's
right.
right.
Exactly.
To make sure we can still keep doing what we're doing in the meantime, and maybe they'll forget it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's good
That's a
science.
deflection.
Yeah.
But like you said, a minimum stream flow, and
Well, I
we've been
wish
trying
that-
that all over the West
I wish
with
that
varying degrees of success.
when he said tie that, turn on the tap, right? Well, those aquifers are charged by that river, and it never is just that creek,
Right.
right? I mean, you don't have to be an ecological warrior to understand that if the damn creek is dry and there's no fish in it, that there's other bad stuff happening as well.
Sure.
Edward Abbey is smiling at his grave right now.
I hope
for
so.
you.
Yeah. I hope so. That would make me feel better.
There you go.
All right, fellas. Well, I'll call her good, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for
very
having us,
much.
Hal.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about fishing.
No, we're going to go
We're not
fishing.
giving nothing away.